Hello, I'm Jane Simpson. I began the Let's Talk MND podcast after my husband Robert was diagnosed with MND and he died 10 months later. This podcast has built an MND family. We share real stories from people living with MND, those who love them, and we learn about research and care in plain English. I'm not an expert, just someone with lived experience, and together we are stronger. This podcast is proudly supported by Evercare, an assisted living brand that shares our belief in independence, dignity, and community. You can learn more about their range at evercare.com.au, or you can find them in Bunnings Warehouse stores nationally. I'm so thankful for Evercare's support of the MND community, and I really hope that you enjoyed today's conversation. Good morning, everybody. Today we have someone who's not personally affected by MND, but over the years I've brought you people whom I think can help us in our journey. So Bill Mcartney is a seasoned executive with extensive experience in business leadership, media production and marketing. Makes you sound pretty highfalutin there, particularly within media and high-octane sports. Ooh, Bill. The reason I want to talk to Bill today is about a part of his new business, which is called Family Record, but I want to let Bill talk about all of that. Good morning, Bill.
Morning, Jane. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. I met Bill through my dad. So Dad has known Bill for a long time, and he thought that Bill's business would be of benefit to some of us. So Bill, we like to start off with finding out who you are, not what you do. So who's Bill?
Well, I'm very proudly a grandfather to three beautiful grandchildren who love to be at our house and tear it apart on a regular basis.
Good.
And hunt out my chocolates and steal them and eat them.
Good.
They think that I disapprove of that, but actually I don't really disapprove.
You hide them on purpose, yeah.
And so that's an absolute joy. And Cheryl and I have been married for 55 years. We've got three sons. And, you know, of all the things I've done in my life, broadly speaking, I think these are the things that I'm most happy about and where I've done my best, I think. But then, you know, I've done a lot of different things in a working sense, and have been, I guess, rather impulsive about all that and followed where my interests and passions have taken me. And that's, you know, you run the gauntlet when you do that. But, you know, I take the whacks and get on with it, and it's all worked out okay.
Did you study as a journalist or not? Because you're a good writer.
I was a journalist in the days when you did a cadetship.
Oh.
So I did a cadetship over at TVW7 in Perth, where I was born in Perth and raised in Perth. And so I did a cadetship, which is a very different layup to how they go about it now, where it's all university educated and I think not as good.
That's fine. I probably agree with you. And then tell us about your working life.
Well, having been a journalist, a television journalist, I went to Hong Kong when I was 21 and became a newspaper journalist with the Star newspaper in Hong Kong for a year, which was a wonderful experience. I was 21 years old, but at the same time got married to Cheryl and started having children. So after that, I went in Hong Kong. I was selling real estate. Then I got a call from John Cornell and Paul Hogan, or John Cornell specifically, in 73 to come down and join he and Clyde Packer and Mike Willesee at CMJ, which was all about the emergence of this young talent, Paul Hogan, on A Current Affair and then the Hogan shows. And I was assistant producer of the show and office manager of the business for some years, which was a wonderful experience.
That was a good gig.
That was great. That was great. And the recent documentary that Delvine produced around Croc Dundee and John, I don't know if you heard about that or that. It's a wonderful piece of work, and I'm in that because I was there at a seminal time for Hogs and for Croc Dundee and the whole thing. So then I went freelance writing and then working as a waiter in restaurants, and I ran a snack bar in a hotel. Finally, I landed along that journey. I landed as publicity director for World Series Cricket, where I was at for 2 years, which is a wonderful experience. And then I joined the Edgley organisation, And after a period of some 5 years, I was running Hoyt Chesley Productions, and we produced films like The Coolangatta Gold, Indecent Obsession, One Night Stand, Burke and Wills, and we were on the edge of Snowy Man from Snowy River and Phar which was wonderful. During the course of that exercise, I increasingly became became captured, enveloped in my passion for the flying 18-foot skiffs on Sydney Harbour, the very fast sail racing boats. And in '86, we started Grand Prix sailing, which was a very, very tough thing to make work, but we made it work, and that was our business for 11 years with our telecasts running in the lunch breaks of the international cricket telecasts on 9 and also on 10 and here, there and everywhere, which was great. And then we sold out of Grand Prix sailing in back end of '97, and I fiddled around with, okay, what do I do now? I did some courses with Landmark Education in which I realised that I wanted to do better as a husband and father and things like that, and try to improve myself somewhat. So I started a fathers and sons program with my son Jack and all his mates and the fathers, which translated further on into Cahoots. And the foundation of Cahoots was some communications courses I did at Landmark Education, where they taught us how to and the power of effective listening. And I absolutely loved that and found that to be an incredibly interesting thing for me. And when I practiced that, I found I was actually quite good at it. I found that to be something that people really appreciated, to be listened to well. And that then communicated through to Family Record and Business Story Productions, wherein we get people to tell the story of their experience of life or their experience of business or whatever it might be. And there have been a few other things here and there along the way, but it's been quite a wide variety of things that we've got ourselves involved in.
I think you're a good talker as well as a good listener. I said, I think you're a good talker as well as a good listener. Why I have you here today is to talk about Cahoots and the family storytelling. So tell us what it is and why you're doing it.
Well, it came about because, I'd done these courses and I got very interested in what impact I might have with this technique for listening to people, because I tried it out and I really enjoyed what it evoked in people and what came out of it in understanding people and getting a picture for how people go about making their lives work and what works and so forth. So at the time I was on the board of the Sydney Swans, and I thought, gee, and Ron Barassi was a fellow director. He'd ceased to be coach and he was on the board. And I said to Ron, look, I'd really like to conduct an on-camera interview with you just to see what comes out of this approach I take and see whether it's got something of value in the media. So I went down to the club and sat down with him and interviewed him with my son Christo doing all the recording and post-production. And I interviewed him for 2.5 hours. And at the end of it, he said, Bill, I'm not in the least bit interested in you exposing this to the general public through the media, but I do want this for my family, because this is the Ron Barassi I want my family to know. And I thought, oh, my goodness me, okay, this is what we're going to do. And I rang Shez straight away, who's always worked closely with me for throughout most of my career. My wife, Cheryl, has worked with me and been enormously valuable to what we've done. And so I said, hey, we're going to do this. And so off we went. So I think the terrific thing is that in a world where everyone tends to want to be the one talking, not the one listening, and in a world where the listening is often in the context of what can I say, and so all the other voices are in our ear and we're thinking about it, what do I need to say to be smart here, and where do I need to take the conversation? So you're not actually listening to understand, you're listening to make comment and entertaining all the voices in your ear. The technique that I learnt was to listen to understand. And when you listen to someone to understand them, then they come to feel understood. And in the modern world, and maybe always, I don't know, but in the modern world, I think for all of us to feel that we're understood and that someone's not then telling them what to do and giving advice and all those sorts of things is highly valued. And so the approach that I take when I interview people is to understand them and not make any value judgments or offer any advice or any of that sort of thing. So that makes it a wonderful experience, because for me, that means for 2.5 hours, I'm in your world, I'm out of my world. And, being in your own head a lot can be a real pain in the bum, But in the case of our work, I'm able to have this 2.5 hours. And I invariably, and some of them are more challenging than others, of course, but I invariably come out of it with a great sense of peace and calmness and, almost like I've done a yoga session or something like that. And it's a very rewarding thing to do.
What about your subject? How do they feel?
I'm sorry, Jane, the sound's gone again.
What about your subject?
The subjects, look, invariably they enjoy the experience. I haven't had anyone say anything, and we've done over 450 individual family records now, and I haven't had anyone at the end of it say that was anything but a good experience. The question is, what level of good experience do they have? And I think we judge our success in each interview on the extent to which the person we're recording has to explore their mind and explore their being for the answer to a question. In other words, it's an exploration for them as well, and they discover things about themselves along the way. And if we are able to achieve that, then that just makes it especially rewarding.
So Bill and his crew come along to your home and they do an interview with you for the 2.5 hours, which is videoed, obviously. And then you edit it and deliver it back. That's the package, yeah?
It is. We do an edit. We give it back to them. We then request photographs if they want photographs to be incorporated, which is where the process gets very detailed, and there's a lot of work involved in actually getting people to deliver the photographs. And we also get the person we've interviewed to look at it and tell us what they want done with it. So we always give them control of the production, so that the person interviewed or the couple, when we get couples together, we always make sure that they know that they are the final arbiter as to what is in and what is out, because we like to explore areas that they're not sure if they should talk about, because that's where it gets rich. And then, say, look, later on, if you want to leave it in or take it out, that's entirely up to you. So we give them full control at the end of the day.
So it's done in two parts. So people talk about their business lives, and that particularly to their business life, but then the family stories that we're talking about is you can go back to childhood, can't you? So the person can discuss all facets of their life, and then there's a family record forever for their family.
That's exactly right. And we find that the real richness often is in that period from birth through to the age of 21, is where you get the foundations of a person's life, and where you have the opportunity to really explore and go looking for things that happened and people who were influential and events that occurred that they had to deal with. And for example, one thing we always ask people to explore with us is their first memory or memories of being alive. What's the first thing you can remember about being alive? They'll tend to want to be general about that, but we always try to say, no, come on, let's talk specifically about something that occurred that has really stuck in your mind. Don't worry whether it looks minor or unimportant or whatever. What stuck in your mind about, when you were 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 years old. And that's always great fun. Great fun.
I can remember mine.
Yeah.
I am the eldest of 3. Mum and Dad had 3 under 3. And I remember my mother's waters breaking and going into labour for the 3rd one.
There you go. Well, that was a seminal moment for you, I imagine.
Yeah, I remember it clearly. Mum can't believe I can believe it. I remember it, but I clearly remember it, yeah.
Because you were alarmed, do you think?
No, they're very chill, my parents, so no. But then I also remember when that baby was born, my brother and I were taken to the hospital, but we could only stand in the car park and wave at my mummy through the window because children weren't allowed in hospitals at that point. So mummy was inside the hospital crying and we were in the car park crying.
Oh, dear me, eh? Oh, gosh.
Wasn't such a successful visit.
Well, them was the days.
Them was the days. Yeah. So why I think this is interesting for you to hear Bill and learn about Bill is that I know that a lot of people with MND are interested in telling their story, and you feel like your life is compressed, which it is. And I just think that this is a really lovely way to be able to say what you want to say, to tell your story, and to have a legacy as well, which is extremely important to a lot of us. It doesn't have to be released. It can only be released to your family. It can only be released after your passing. So, you know, the control is yours, as Bill has said. And I mean, you interview a lot of people who don't want it released to public, who only want it released to family. And you have interviewed some extremely high profile people, and you would get some extraordinary media coverage from it, but that's not what you do.
No, that's right. This is purely for the family. So this is not for public release at all, unless the family decide they want to release it to the public. But what families often let us do, in fact, virtually always, is where we see a piece out of a recording that we think has particular interest. It might be, for example, there's often a lot of very interesting material around people's experience of being bullied and how it became a seminal event for them when they realized that they didn't have to be under the control of a bully, you know, the fight back factor. And so people generally allow us to utilize segments that speak to some of the key ingredients that drop out of the process insofar as how life's lived and enriched. But we only show that if we have permission to do so. Beyond that, it is entirely for the family and the future generations only. And of course, you know, part of what we got to see and part of what I wish I had with my father, who died when I was 27 and he was only 66, was to understand how he dealt with what he was faced with in the course of his life, and explore, you know, the dilemmas he had to deal with, and understand that, and understand the example of how you go about living life effectively and overcoming the things we all have to overcome in order to. And you're a great example. You've had to overcome just a heck of a lot, and you know, you've had some real stuff in your face, Jane, that you know, could have flattened a lesser person. But my guess is that by overcoming as you have, the pain of it all doesn't actually, I don't think it goes away, but
No.
the fact that you can deal with it and overcome it, and in some ways perhaps get inspiration from it, means that, you know, that it hasn't all been bad and that you've grown stronger as a result. Would you say that's a fair thing to
Oh,
say?
absolutely, much stronger. And I thought I was strong before, but I'm stronger now. And also, my personal belief is that what I've learnt, if I can help anybody, then I will help somebody. That's all there is to it. Give.
How did that come to be a product of it, do you think?
Oh, because I often say when I'm giving speeches that I was filled with an overwhelming rage and anger, and I could either direct it for good or evil. So I decided to direct it to good, which is better for me and better for the community at large. Yeah.
A conscious decision.
It was a conscious decision, yes.
Almost the you know, goodness overcoming evil in a way, or, you know, so
Yeah.
what we need more of in the world just now.
We really do at this moment need more of that. We have, so why is it a good idea to do this?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think it provides your future generations with a sense of who they are. So when you see someone who is a revered character in the lineage, and someone who the family has already acknowledged as being a very important person in the whole matrix of the family, and you see what they have come to stand for, how they've dealt with the issues that they've dealt with, how they've formulated their values, what influences they've had that have worked to the good, and what influences that they've had to overcome. In other words, the broad range of experiences that life offers, then the future generations get a sense of how they've dealt with that, and therefore where they come from. So one of the I always go looking for key motivators. For example, what really motivates people, and one of the ones I've loved to uncover, and it comes up from time to time, and there are a lot of different things that are nominated, but one is honour thy father and thy mother. And I think it's such a, and I don't say that in a religious context, I say it in a practical context, because when the particular person I was recording said that to me, I was so moved by it, because I realised how much honouring my mother and father, I would say particularly my father, had been such a strong motivation for me. So I think that's where it provides inspiration and guidance as to where you can go. They're always interesting stories. We've done over 450 of them, and there has not been a single story that was dull or uninteresting. So the old adage that everyone's got an interesting story is actually true. But sometimes they come into the recording going, "Oh God, I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm not very interesting." And so they start off in a mindset, I'm not interesting, and they start off therefore being not interesting. But what I love to do then is to bump them around a bit and get through that shell of not interesting and find out what dwells within. So, yeah, these are things that that come out of it that reward us greatly. And I think also just seeing what possibilities are out there as to how we can live our lives, and the sense of what works in life and what works in terms of parenthood. So we get to see how parenting has impacted people, how people see their parents, how often they say, my parents were really tough on me, and at the time I was not too happy about how tough they were, but now I'm eternally grateful, is a story you often hear. And how, I suppose one of the conclusions I've drawn out of it, Jane, is how important tough love is to young people. And I think people generally, actually.
Yeah.
But certainly for our children, tough love is really important. It's the hardest thing to do in this very material world we have.
Yeah.
Like, tough love is hard because you sort of look like a meanie, and you got to suffer the pain of, there's pain for the parent in tough love. A lot more pain, I think, for the parent than there is for the child. But it's such an incredible asset when we're able to do it with love, like tough with love. Yeah. So things like that, and we get a lot of feed. We've had an awful lot of feedback and testimonials from people as to the impact it's had, and how seeing their mum and or dad or grandma or grandfather, they're all live on the screen and very emotive and really telling their story. And the biggest reward in that regard is when the children say, gee, we have never heard that before. We never heard that before. We never heard that before. And then when they say it's just music, it's an orchestra playing at full belt to us, it's marvelous.
It's beautiful. Yeah, there's so many questions that I want to know of my parents, even though I see them every day. But it's just life. So I'll be writing them down so you can find out for me.
Well, that's exactly what we do say to the children is, sit down and have a think about what you want to know that you don't know. What do you want to know that you don't know? And take some time and think about that. And there'll be things. If you give yourself some time, there'll be things. And then make sure you note down also what you want to make sure I don't miss that you do know. So that's, we love to get the children involved in that way. Yeah.
So what events, excitement, action have you got coming up for this year?
Well, by crikey, we've got a schedule of family records, which we would always like to be doing more of, because we so enjoy it, and of course it's part of the commerciality of our enterprise. We've got some very interesting business stories to record and produce, which we use the same fundamental philosophy with. We get the people to tell their story. So we don't do voiceover scripts and all those sorts of things. We can, but it's not the way we do our best work. It is getting people to tell their story. So we've got that going. On Thursday night, I've got one of our insight dinners. So over the last 23 years, we've probably done 300 insight dinners. We get 14 to 16 people around the table. Everyone introduces themselves, and then I lead the conversation and find out about the person, very importantly, and then open it up to a range of topics and subjects that the person who is the focal point is considered to be very knowledgeable about and interested in. And so we drink some wine and we have some nice food and we have great fun with those. On Thursday night this week in Sydney, the person I have in the seat is the man Kerry Packer said is the greatest television news, current affairs and infotainment producer this country's ever seen, Mr. Peter Meakin.
Oh, gosh. Okay, that's good. That'll be an interesting one.
He's a great character. I worked with him back in Perth when I was a cadet. And when he was at 9, he was very helpful to me when we were with Grand Prix sailing and it really supported me. And I was briefly Chief of Staff of TCN 9 News as well along the way. So I'm really looking forward to that. He's a great man, and a great man who openly admits his foibles and faults. And by the way, he says this. He says, and he will say that he would never have been as effective in his work if he hadn't had alcohol.
Oh, he says that.
He said that.
I know some people in his life who might disagree about his personal life, but hey, hell.
It's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
But behind it is that he said the after the news every night, he and Sam Chisholm and all the boys would go up into the chairman's bar up in the top of TCN 9 and talk about shows and angles and stories and where we want to go next with this. And out of that came the show's Money, the show Sex, you may remember. And Meakin was the guy who came up with both of those. So what he found was alcohol fueled, fertilized, lubricated the creative process by which they discussed programming and expressed their passion for what they were doing. So it's an interesting perspective, I thought.
It is, but for those playing along at home, it doesn't mean that you can do this whenever you want.
No, that's right. That's right. That's right. I would certainly don't encourage people to immediately pick up a bottle of wine and start drinking it at 10 a.m. That's for sure. Yeah.
Oh, Bill, you've been a joy. Thank you so much for giving us some time today.
My absolute pleasure, Jane.
I just love the concept, and I hope that it's useful to some people who are thinking about this. And I will put your contact details and the website at the bottom of the info for this podcast, for this YouTube.
Thank you.
We'll go from there. But yeah, you are a character. I was told that. I was warned.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks, Jane. See you next time. See you soon, I hope.
I look forward to it.
If you'd like to get in touch, you can message me on the Let's Talk MND Facebook or Instagram pages, or Let's Talk MND5@gmail.com. The information on this podcast is not medical advice, and the music you hear is by a much-loved member of our family, John Hanley. Once again, thanks to Evercare for sponsoring this podcast and supporting Let's Talk MND. Their commitment to care and community helps make meaningful conversations like today's possible.